too squishy, man. I can't kill shit. The Prot Warrior. Oh, he's about to charge. Let's go. Aggro, fool. This is why you need talents, gear, covenants, rotations, and more.
Hey, I bet you play other games too, huh? Well, we do as well, and we have a channel that we use to make videos about them. Weird, right? Diablo 2, Slay the Spire, Among Us, Pokemon, and more. So yeah, go check it out, see if it vibes with you. We could really use some love over there as well, you know, just a little to stay warm during the upcoming winter. On the first row, take Devastator as always. The main reason this is good is because it replaces your filler / spamming ability with a passive buff to your auto attacks. The value of this comes from freeing up a global to use on other stuff, give you more damage overall, as well as extra rage. Prot Warrior is a haste focused spec that wants to use every global to maximum efficiency and always have something to press, so taking out useless abilities from your rotation, well, not really useless, is very beneficial in making you press a more impactful ability instead and have the effect of Devastate delegated to auto attacks. On the next row, Double Time will be your most used talent in raid, most of the time. It gives you the most amount of mobility and rage generation and the cost of being a bit harder to play efficiently. It's also mandatory for the Reprisal build, which we will go over in the Legendary section. Alternatively, Storm Bolt will be a safe pick, at least in dungeon content, where individual crowd control can be exploited properly. It is still one of the best single target stuns in the game and very useful. Likely not the best for the Reprisal build, but a good choice in any other situation. On the third row, take Booming Voice in raids and for the non-Reprisal build. This will make your demo shout generate a fat load of rage. Yeah. And also increase the damage you deal to your targets by 20%, making Demo Shout an ideal cooldown to press the second it becomes available. Best Served Cold works for the DPS build since Reprisal will use a combination of charges and revenges into your playstyle to increase your shield block uptime. Because of this, you will be casting more revenges than normal, and having the procs and the skill itself be stronger will overall increase your DPS by a lot. Moving down the list, we get to the fourth talent row, which has two options as well. Bounding Stride will work really well in raids where you will often have to leap away to drop, say, a Painsmith axe to the side and quickly get back to the boss. Having a lower cooldown on the heroic leap and a little burst of speed afterwards makes your range over the battlefield be bigger and more versatile. Crackling Thunder works better in dungeons. The increase in range of Thunderclap makes it easier to gain aggro and deal damage on packs where the mobs are a little more spread out. The 20% move speed reduction is nice when you actually have to kite, although in normal situations you will likely have a better kite mechanic from one of your party members. The added 10% move speed reduction is nice when you actually have to kite, although in normal situations you will likely have a better kite mechanic from one of your party members. Next up, Indomitable will be your best choice here. It gives you a boost to your HP and makes you heal a bit every time you spend rage. This is your sustain option and can put out similar HPs to some of your healer's cooldowns or main healing abilities, provided you manage your rage properly. That means optimizing generating maximum amounts of rage and spending it without capping any, or as little as possible will make you a beast. For the level 45 talent row, two options once again are viable. Into the Fray will be your raiding choice. This will give you a boost to your haste levels, which really matter more in single target and prolonged fights like a raid boss, where you don't want to run out of juice before the boss dies. And yeah, you will swap tanking with your co-tank, but your main rotational abilities are still influenced by haste as far as their cooldowns are concerned. Devastator makes your melee attacks, also influenced by haste, matter when it comes to shield slam resets. In dungeons, Ravager will take the cake. It gives you a quick access to AoE burst and rage generation. It's essentially what you want in a dungeon, especially with Mongo DPSers like Havoc and Arms. That aggro is a bitch. And last but not least, anger management on the last row will be still your cookie cutter choice for pretty much all builds, especially the reprisal build. This will essentially make your entire playstyle smoother, particularly because of the avatar cooldown reduction, which gives you access to a decently strong button way quicker when it comes to regeneration and damage dealt. And yeah, damage is important for tanks, although not as important as it is for DPS players. Similar with Shield Wall, especially if you run the Wall Legendary, Shield Wall can become a very accessible cooldown. Sometimes a bit too accessible, which is why for the Wall Legendary you might want Bolster instead, since most damage you will take is blockable physical damage, and in terms of tankiness, Bolster will be of much more value. This will literally make you into a fucking rock of a tank. Having Last Stand gives you shield block for 15 seconds on top of the 30% HP boost for that duration and be a 2-minute cooldown instead of 3. With these tools, you will rotate your cooldowns for a very high uptime on your defensives. Heavy Repercussion is your ultra defensive passive option to further make you into a metal rock wall thing that never dies stuff. You get it. It will effectively increase your shield block uptime to over 90% if used properly, and in theory. Stat priority is always a bit relative when it comes to tanks. Almost always. As a general rule, eye level is usually the best since it means strength, stamina, armor, and a bigger chunk of secondary stats. It's most of the time the safer bet, most of the time since Domination gear from the raid has stronger bonuses in its shard system that will outperform raw eye level. Following this is haste, and will always be haste for as long as Prot Warrior maintains its current design. Haste affects pretty much everything that's important when it comes to your rotation and general playstyle. Damage, tankiness, regeneration, all for the reduced cooldown that haste brings to your major abilities. After haste, versatility will be your next best thing as the best overall stat for both defensive purposes and offensive ones as well. Following this, you have mastery and crit for raiding, and crit followed by mastery for dungeons. For dungeons specifically, crit becomes a bit better, maybe even equal to versatility when in large fights, since the added parry chance rounds up better when more shit hits you. And of course, the value of crit brings the extra damage to the table, which is always welcome in Mythic Plus. For the consumables, start by enchanting your weapon, ideally with Celestial Guidance in general, but you can also go for Lightless Force in M+ for more AoE damage when you feel comfortable doing so. On your chest piece, use Eternal Stats and a Heavy Desolate Armor Kit to complete your set. Pop an Eternal Strength on your gloves and finish it up with Fortified Leech on the cloak for stamina, but also a bit more movement speed to make it easier for you to move around. And in keeping with your stat priority, use the Quick Jewel Cluster Gem for your sockets and the 10 out of Haste enchant for your rings. As for the alchemy side of things, always have the Spectral Flask of Power on, and when needed, pop a Potion of Spectral Strength as your pre-combat potion of choice, which can easily be min-maxed with a Phantom Fire on single target and Empower Exorcism for AoE. And for oils, no oils, but stones. Yeah, just use the Sharpening Stones or Weight Stones for your weapon imbue and you will be good to go. And last but not least, eat the goddamn Tenebrous Crown roast aspect food. That's a mouthful. That's what she said. Haha, she didn't because she had a mouthful. Why am I saying this? Why? No, just move to the next section. .9.1 is almost upon us, and it will make Covenant swapping way easier. Play whatever you like most, really, as long as you are not looking to be the next person to get World First plus 30 key or something similar. Otherwise, it's more important how you play your Prot Warrior than what Covenant you choose. But hey, there are still some options that are performing above the rest. Night Fae is the first on the list. Works pretty well, especially if you off-spec to Fury every now and again. Has good damage, good rage generation with Ancient Aftershock and the legendary associated with Night Fae. Nia will be your single target soulbind that you can use in raids by building her on the Nia's Toolsbur's path. For AoE and Mythic Plus, generally Khorane with First Strike will be your best choice for that crit damage. Although you can play the Covenant in both encounter types, Night Fae is ideally better used for Mythic Plus. Kyrian is likely the best choice in all encounters, arguably better than Night Fae in dungeons as well. Spear of Bastion will be a really good source of burst damage and rage generation and a decent root, especially nice in dungeons when you don't have a druid to use Vortex. Outside of this, the best Soulbind in the world is Mechanicos, and the main reason why a lot of specs have switched to Kyrian. Mechanicos builds to its last trait that will make your Spear of Bastion have a reduced cooldown the more targets you hit, up to a total of 40-second cooldown, giving you access to the benefits of Spear way more often, translating in a lot more damage and overall rage gain in dungeons. Building Mechanicos on the Hammer of Genesis and Soul Glow Spectrometer seems to be the best bet right now. If for some reason you don't want Mechanicos or haven't unlocked them yet, Pelagos is the second best choice here. A simpler Soulbind to build, going for better together as your focus with swaps between Endurance and Finesse Conduits based on your personal preference. Speaking of which, the best choices in Potency Conduits see Piercing Verdict or Destructive Reverberations as your first choice based on the Covenant of choice. Adaptive Armor Fragment will be your next best choice, so many choices, with maybe Show of Force third if you want a 3 potency route for your Soulbind, although the Conduit is incredibly bad, so bad that ideally you would want a maximum of 2 potency route for your Soulbind. Endurance Conduits start from Stalwart Guardian as the best choice, especially with Anger Management as the talent and maybe even the Wall Legendary. Next best thing is Unerring Focus for Mythic Plus and Condensed Anima Sphere as a more general option. For the finesse slots, get Inspiring Presence, one of the best, and Safeguard, which implies you actually use Intervene with a purpose other than proccing Reprisal. When it comes to trinkets, Blood Spattered Scale is still the best tanking trinket to aim for when it comes to Mythic Plus, with a new contender from Tazavesh now being the Ticking Sack of Terror. There's a joke here. It's not family friendly. Let's move on. The raid comes with Shard of Anhild's Aegis, potentially the best actual tanking trinket if we are talking survivability, and Old Warrior Soul for that raw stat boost. Reactive Defense Matrix from the raid also performs really well in dungeons with some of the best DPS and HPS output out there. And if nothing else is available, the File of Putrefaction is a pretty good DPS choice, maybe even one of the best out there. As for the tier set, the shard set you want for the raid will be Blood Link. Ideally, if raiding is your jam, you want to get the 3 blood shards leveled as quickly as possible, adding the DPS shards in the other slots. The DPS shards are Beck and Diz from Blood and Unholy respectively, because you will be using a non-DPS shard for your Frost set. And if you are focusing on Mythic Plus, you would want the Beck and Diz as well as the Kier shard from the Frost for the very big chunk of survivability. And as long as you are not crafting your legendary on a domination gear piece, you'll be Gucci, and you have a few options with some alternatives for some gameplay variety. The wall remains a very solid defensive option if you can match shield wall cooldown reduction with a mechanic that can be mitigated by that cooldown specifically and that cannot be otherwise blocked. It plays into the build we discussed in the talents and generally becomes the safest build to use in all content. Reprisal is probably the best option that still combines very high uptime on shield block with a lot of potential revenge damage if charge weaving can be incorporated into your raid tanking, since it's definitely the best in M+ where charging around is easier. Alternatively, Seismic Reverberations will provide the absolute most amounts of DPS at the cost of a little tankiness. In very high keys, you have to really know how to play the spec to pull it off and compensate for the lack of survivability. It is riskier to play, but we wanted to mention it for the purpose of covering all grounds. And for Night Fae warriors, Nature's Fury will make Ancient Aftershock last longer, hit harder, and make you coffee in the mornings as well. As opposed to other specs, the raid doesn't drop any outstanding weapons or shield with a cool proc. However, the Guard of Sundered Defender from Sylvanas will likely be at a higher eye level than most shields that you can get. and definitely higher if it is the Mythic Shield. Similar argument with Kel'Thuzad's, the Devouring Cold Sword, as your one-hander of choice. Just statistics, sure, but the higher eye level will be worth it unless you can replace them with generic 252 weekly vault counterparts. The opener remains the same as always. If you talent it into Ravager, throw it from range before you charge and taunt at the same time, following it up with Avatar. Pop Shield Block, Pop Shield Slam, use Demo Shout if you have Booming Voice, Thunderclap next, and then you proceed with the normal rotation. Shield Block, Taunt, and Avatar are not on the global cooldown, so essentially they can all be pressed during your charge. Note that Reprisal gives you a few seconds of Shield Block when you charge. The general priority that you need to think about sees Avatar as the most important button to press as it becomes available, following it up with Demo Shout if you are talented into Booming Voice. Your Covenant abilities, the third on the list, Pop Ravager lower down the priority list, cast Shield Slam on cooldown, Thunderclap next, follow it up with Execute when the target is below the HP threshold, Revenge if it's a proc or if you need to Rage Dump for the purpose of dealing damage. Usually you want to spend the extra rage you have on either Ignore Pain or Revenge, and the choice is always between a little more damage intake smoothness, since Ignore Pain is often overvalued, or more damage, which in most situations, dungeons especially, helps kill the pack quicker, and as a consequence you will reach the point of running out of your cooldowns less often. The rotation in AoE is similar to the single target rotation when DPS is concerned. Otherwise, generating rage with Shield Block, Thunderclap, and Charge alongside the appropriate cooldowns and talents will be your most important part of any rotation. Otherwise, if your tankiness is not an issue, meaning the pack will die before you run out of rage, or you die, or your healer runs out of mana, or the fight just becomes excruciatingly annoying, you can optimize your DPS output by casting your Covenant ability on cooldown, Ravager after, Revenge if you have the rage, Thunderclap lower down the list, Shield Slam on cooldown next. When approaching a pack, it's usually worth casting Revenge quick on it even if you want to optimize tankiness, since getting aggro is important. All of this was the optimization of damage and cooldown uptime, but damage should never be your first goal. Tanking and mitigating damage is your first objective. How you use your mitigation falls down on your rotation and how well you keep everything up. Shield Block is your best tool for all physical attacks, almost all of them, and you will reduce the damage they deal to you by a very large amount. Not all attacks are blockable, but most of them are. For example, the Necrotic Wake Last Boss Frost casts are actually blockable. Sense made a neat spreadsheet that has all the abilities that are blockable, which is worth checking out. Link is down in the description. Another important tool too many prot warriors omit is Spell Reflect. The first thing this does is to reflect spells. Duh. Once you have reflected a spell, you lose the buff. You can reflect a lot of stuff you might not be aware of. The Soul Crusher ability from Muezala, for instance, is reflectable. The Explosive Contrivance from Dealer in Other Side is also reflectable. The Theater of Pain, Last Boss Reaping Scythe is also reflectable. These are all abilities that hit incredibly hard, and the explosive thing aside, these are meant to chunk tanks really hard, and you will take 0 damage. The second thing is that if Spell Reflect does not actually reflect anything, it will still stay up for its 5-second duration, giving you a flat 20% magic damage reduction for that time, which is incredibly useful for a 25-second cooldown ability. There are more examples like this. Practice, test, or simply go to the Skyhole community and talk with the Chad warriors there and see what's what. One of the chaddest of them all is Mwahi, who helped with feedbacking and explaining and checking everything related to this guide so I don't talk shit to you. Thanks, Mwahi. You rock. Thank you to the patrons who also rock very hard in supporting our channel. We really appreciate your help, guys. Really close to heart. It means a lot, and you make a lot of this possible. And if you, dear viewer, are interested in seeing exactly what's what and what you can do to help us more, if you're interested in that, the link is down in the description. We thank you very much for your time and interest. You might find things there that are, you know, interesting to you. But that's kind of it. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still,